And really, in my sermon this morning, 19 through 34 really is, to me, one central theme, basically. And I thought that would work a little bit better for my sermon. So anyway, we switched that, but we're going to get it all in. So we get done today. We have spent 6 lessons, including the sermons and Bible classes on the Sermon on the Mount. And Linda, we could spend a lot more, couldn't we? Because there's a lot of good material here for us to think about. So we're glad you're with us in our study this morning. Matthew chapter 7, beginning in verse 1, Jesus said, "Judge not that you be not judged. For with what judgment you judge, you will be judged. And the measure you use will be measured back to you. And why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me remove the speck in your eye, and look, a plank is in your own eye? Hypocrite, first remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Do not give what is holy to the dogs, nor cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn and tear you in pieces." Let's pause for just a moment and pray together. Father, we're grateful for the day, for the blessings that you provide for us, and the spiritual blessings in Christ, for our church family, for this occasion that we can come together to study, and for our worship today. Bless those that are family that are not with us today, for those that are sick and suffering, that you would give them healing if it be your will. Bless those whose hearts are heavy and give them comfort, and help us today as we wait before you that we may honor you in our worship. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Well, this is a theme, this whole Sermon on the Mount, that fits right into our focus this year on becoming like Christ. And so what better way could we begin to think about what it means to become like Christ than to look at the Sermon on the Mount? And so hopefully that sets the stage for the rest of the year for us. We refer to these as the radical teachings of Jesus, and indeed in some quarters what Jesus said is very radical. We're going to see some things today, both in the class and in our sermon this morning, that the world would consider extremely radical or extreme. This particular section, 7:1 through 5, is often quoted, especially verse 1, but often misunderstood. What does Jesus mean here, judge not that you be not judged? We'd like to tackle that. All right, Kevin.
Section's talking about critical judgment, so he's talking about, don't judge incorrectly, don't judge critically, judge out of love, judge righteous judgment, right? We go through this whole section and see some of those ideas.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Not to judge in a hypocritical or a hypercritical manner. Now, when you think about the attitudes that kind of judging involves, hypocritical and, you know what I mean by hypercritical, all right? And I think really it kind of involves both, because by being hypercritical, and he's talking about that they're hypocritical because they're judging people, they got worse things in their lives. So what kind of attitudes are behind that kind of judging? Richard?
Well, I guess self-righteousness would be one.
Self-righteousness. All right, good. What else? What's not good, but that's the right answer. All right. What else? What other kind of attitudes would be indicative of this, Tim?
Rooted in pride.
Pride. It'd be rooted in pride. Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
One that does not show mercy.
Okay, an unmerciful attitude. One is not, we study the Beatitudes, does not show mercy. Yes.
A lot of times judgments are made against others to make yourself feel more important.
Yeah, sometimes it is a problem of a person's own esteem, and they think that they're more important, and I can point to someone else, I'm better than you are. Yeah, okay, all right. Any other thoughts here? I don't know if I got all these now. Harsh would certainly be one. It's a harshness that we ought not have, a censorious attitude. Certainly it is insensitive. The motives are improper, certainly questionable motives, and as well as the other things that you all had mentioned. Now, this judging, he says, judge not that you be not judged. How does that reconcile with John 7:24? Do you think? Kevin's already alluded to that. where Jesus said, judge not according to appearance, but judge righteous judgment. Now, the answer is almost found when you look at the whole thing, Vicki. Well, it would certainly involve that you're judging other people the way that you would want to be judged. What else is suggested here? Yes, Wade?
Later in Matthew 7, 15 through 20, it tells us by your fruits you will know them. So, I mean, it's the result of people's actions and the motive that you know if they're doing what's right or not.
Yeah, and we're going, like I say, we're going to get that later in 7, that you look at the fruit that is born, and you can make a judgment that is based on that. See, the former has the wrong intent. See, in Matthew 7, we're talking about based on circumstances or appearances. The latter, in John 7, is based upon righteousness. And God's standard of righteousness has the right intent and the right motive, doesn't it? You know, in righteousness is rooted in the gospel. Romans 1:16 and 17. And so when we look at God's system of righteousness and we judge righteous judgment, then we're judging based upon the right attitude, the right motive, proper facts. We're judging based upon what God has revealed in His Word, in His system of righteousness, as opposed to just looking at the appearance of something. You know, Paul told Timothy to beware of evil surmising. And sometimes we can look at the intent or look with the wrong intent and surmise something and draw a wrong conclusion. It's like we used to have a brother who I preached in Florida that every day this guy would go into a bar. Every day, every work day, he would go into a bar, Monday through Friday. And if you saw him coming out, you may well wonder, what in the world is Hank doing in a bar? And you might judge that. And if you didn't look closely and realize the uniform he had on, he was a mailman. He had to take the mail inside. Hank said he didn't hang around to get a sandwich or anything. He'd get the mail and get out. But, you know, you might be an IT guy and have to go in a place that you didn't want to go in. I don't know. You might be all kinds of things. And so we might look at someone and judge incorrectly according to an appearance that would be an incorrect judgment. Kevin, did you have something to add to that?
No, it's just a very misunderstood section of Scripture.
It is.
We're talking about discrimination here. It doesn't teach, there's no conflict in John 7.
Not at all.
Discrimination is necessary, right? In order to judge righteous judgment by one's fruits, we can know that sort of. So it's not as those in the world will use it that, oh, you can't tell me that I'm not living as I should, right? Not an idea.
You know, it is ironic that when you see that, and I've been accused that many times in my blog and preaching and everything, that you're judging. You know, and usually if you're talking to someone, or even if they write it, they put it in capital letters. By the way, you know when you text something in capital letters, it's like you're shouting. But I have to say, you're judging. Wow, that's pretty censorious. And they're judging me for judging. You know, it's kind of ironic. But I'm judging based upon God's righteousness, which we're to do, and not according to appearance. Yeah.
If the end of chapter 6 and 7 are very sequential and in a short period of time, in verse 33 it says, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness."
Right.
And so this is in a framework of righteousness.
It is. And I mentioned this, I think, in either my sermon or class, that righteousness, starting with the beatitude to hunger and thirst after righteousness, and our righteousness exceeding the righteousness of the Pharisees, and through here you've got about 5 times at least where Jesus speaks of righteousness. And you have there at the end of chapter 6 the idea of right. Yes?
It also helps us see there's nothing like what it was.
There's nothing like it's what?
It also helps us realize that
I just missed one word. What was it?
in God's eyes,
Okay.
there isn't anything worse
Worse.
than sin.
Exactly.
Whereas for us, we can kind of look at something and it's like, for me it's worse, and I judge. But then the Lord turns that around and shows it's like, what you think is a speck is actually a log.
So what you're saying, if I understand it correctly, there's nothing worse in God's eyes than sin, but in man's eyes a lot of times there's nothing worse than you make a judgment.
And you're making a judgment as if your sin is
Yeah.
better off than somebody
Yeah.
else's sin.
That is so true. Let me just bullet these because we could take the whole class and we wouldn't get the rest of it done. But the Bible tells us to judge. And you can write these down if you care to, but Romans 13:15, we're to judge in civil matters. 1 Corinthians 6, Paul even tells the brethren there, instead of going to court, to find someone to judge. He tells them to judge. Find someone to judge. And so when people take Matthew 7 and say you're wrong to judge, they misunderstand the context. We're to judge Acts 4:19 between right and wrong. Peter challenged those that said that he was wrong to do that. And Matthew 19 and 28 and Revelation 2, saints judge the world. And then, as Wade referred to a minute ago, in Matthew 7 there, we're to judge false teachers. And then we see here in verse 6, we're to judge hogs and dogs. All right? So, let's just move to that. We read the verse a second ago. Yeah, hogs and dogs. Yeah, that's what it says. So, what is the application here for Matthew 6:6? Of not casting your pearls before swine. Okay? Yeah.
Well, in this society, dogs weren't as beloved as
Yeah.
some make them today. They were scavengers.
Right.
They were ravaging animals.
Right.
And you wouldn't provide a scavenger with the best of food, circumstances, whatever.
Right.
And the swine, in the eyes of the Jews, were unclean.
Right.
And they were also scavengers.
Right.
And pearls are still highly valued.
Yeah.
And why would you continue to provide these marvelous, monetarily expensive things to an organism that's not going to change?
Right.
Thus, we need to be wise in, and it's a judgment call,
It is.
as to how long we would continue to teach about the righteousness of God and the kingdom to those that totally reject it
Right.
and count it as nothing.
Right. Or to paraphrase, or to quote, I guess, a contemporary politician, you can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. Right. Kevin, you have something to add to that?
I agree with what Brother Hugh said. The Lord said in Matthew 15 and 14 or somewhere around there, about the Pharisees, what he told the disciples, leave them alone.
Right.
That's the idea, I think, as Brother Hugh brought out.
Yeah, that's exactly that. Some people are not prospects for the gospel. And in the parable of the sower that we'll see later in study, the soul of their heart may be hard. It may not be receptive to the gospel. And basically, it can become really a waste of time. There are some people whose motives are impure. And you can see that as you look at their attitudes and their actions and then the fruit they produce. And so, I think as Hugh has correctly exegeted in this passage, no more than you would provide for a scavenger animal or put pearls around the neck of a pig, should we waste our time in trying to share the gospel with people who are not receptive to it. Now, again, that is a judgment call. But, I've known people that have been trying to convert the same guy at work for 20 years. And he's not interested. You're wasting your time. You might as well take your time and energy to somebody else. Or keep trying to study with someone that don't want to study. And so, don't do that. That, I think, is a simple application here. Now, Jesus uses three figures of speech here as we move on to the next section, and I'd like to so we get through this chapter, if y'all don't mind. So he says in verse 7, ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and it will be open to you. For everyone that asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened. Or what man is there among you that if your son asks for bread will give him a stone? Or if he asks for fish will give him a serpent? If you then being evil know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good gifts to those that seek him? And then verse 12, therefore, whatever you want men to do to you, do you also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. So, Jesus uses three figures of speech here as he moves to the idea of prayer. And they are, what? What did we just read? Okay. Well, yeah, I may have got this out of order, did I? Yeah. To knock, to seek, and to ask. Okay? So, we understand those. Those are really metaphors, aren't they? Figures of speech. So what is the point of using these figures of speech? Thought I heard somebody over here. Thought I heard somebody whispering. Okay, when you go ahead.
I think it's speaking to if you're sincerely wanting to serve God, He's going to help you find a way to do so. And I always think of the Apostle Paul or Saul in this situation. Before he was converted, he was doing everything he could in that point in his life. What he thought he was doing was serving the Lord and putting down this sect or whatever he thought it was at that time. And God uses him, shows him the right way. So I think this talks to if you really want to serve God, there will be a way for you to find.
Right. There's two sides to that coin, Jimmy, and I think you take one side of it and what God can do, and God can do incredible things to use us. But if you flip the coin over and look at us, what is it saying? What lesson? Leah, you're kind of looking at me knowingly, so you know where I'm going with this. If you look at it from man's viewpoint.
I don't know if this is where you're going, but it makes me think that we're in a situation where we're dependent on God, but we have to do our part as well. We have to ask for what we need. We have to ask with the right motives. James speaks to that. We have to continually seek. It's not a one-time. And if somebody's knocking on the door and you wait for somebody to come, you're persistent. So it's a continual process that we have to do our part.
Bingo, you hit the key word. Persistent. All three of these, and using these three, speak to the idea of persistence. And so prayer, Jesus is saying, involves a deep desire of the heart, and this is found in the intensity of the prayer, of the frequency of the prayer, and the fervency of the prayer. And like you say, if you think someone is at home and you're there knocking, a lot of times we ring the doorbell, but I ring the doorbell and I'm standing there like this. I say, Norma, did you hear that? Did the bell ring? Because sometimes the doorbell's broken. And so then, now if they have a baby, you go, well, I hate to ring the doorbell, so you knock real light, and you think, well, maybe I knocked so light they didn't hear me, and so you knock a little harder. But if you want to get in, you keep knocking, don't you? You take a child. If a child wants something real badly, what do? They keep on asking, don't they? I mean, they wear you out.
So you give it to them so they'll shut up?
You give it to them so that you might give it to them so they will shut up. But there is a persistence there, you see. Or you're looking for something. You ever going somewhere that's a strange area, and maybe your GPS fails you, or you don't have GPS, but this is not it. Well, if you want to go bad enough, you don't say, well, fool that, we're not going. No, you keep driving around the block, and you stop, and you ask someone. You keep seeking till you find it, don't you? You don't just not go there. And so this is the metaphor here of prayer. And so prayer should be, I think you used the word consistent, Leah, as well as persistent. It's consistent and it's persistent in our request to God. Yes, Dorothy?
Talk about the unjust judge in Luke 18. And Jesus told that parable to them so they always to pray on his heart. Because the unjust judge wasn't going to do anything for them.
She was persistent. And even though he wouldn't have God-fearing man said, I'm tired of hearing this woman, I will avenge her. And said, how much more will God, who is just, avenge his own children that cry to him day and night? Yeah. Men ought always to pray. The New King James says, not the faint. don't know what the New King James says, but not to give up, doesn't it? Yeah. All right. Now, how do you like to be treated by other people? So let's just bullet these real quick with some single words, if you may. So how do you, let's go over here in the land of Goshen. I haven't heard from you about here. Jane Ellen, how are you this morning? How do you like to be treated by other people, Jane Ellen? Nicely. Well, she used two words. Very nicely, but nicely. Okay, yes, ma'am? Kindly. Thank you. And we will move across, yes.
With respect.
Respectfully. Respect, yes.
Fair.
Fairly. Someone here? Yes. Okay, we've got another word, surely. Anybody? Over here. Patience. You want to be treated patiently. Over here. Anybody over here? Hey, you want to be treated, Leah?
I want people to assume that I have good motives. You know, maybe I've made a mistake, but my intent is good.
Yeah,
To
yeah.
judge my motives harshly.
Give you the benefit of the doubt. Okay? Yeah. Well, I mean, we could just, anybody have another one you want to share? I mean, you want to be forgiven? Yes, go ahead. Lovingly, yeah. Yeah, I mean, respect, kindness, courtesy, honestly, openly, forgivingly, with favorable judgment. And the list could go on and on. I've done this in Bible classes sometimes where you got more time and you end up with 25 or 30 words that people come up with. Now, we all know where this is going based on the verse 12. So, how should I treat others? Same way. That's the same. Righteous people treat others right. See? And that's what God's calling us to here is righteousness. Now, how hard is it to understand that, Christy? I mean, do I need to get into the Greek to explain that and parse the sentences and diagram it? I mean, it's not hard to understand, is it? How hard is it to do sometimes? Sometimes it's hard to do, isn't it? Why is it hard to do? When it looks so simple, treat other people the way you want to be treated. Yes, Linda?
I was going to say, there's a school counselor, an elementary school counselor in our district, who has researched this and found that this principle is taught in every religion of the world, every culture. And so she didn't feel it a conflict of religious interest to bring that into our school, which is perfect.
Wonderful.
And she even has an R. She's painted gold in a case in the very front.
You say an R.
The letter R.
Okay.
For respect, teaching,
Oh.
showing others the respect that you want to be given. She calls it the golden R.
The golden R.
Carries it from class to class and talks about the way you treat other people.
I like that a lot.
When we read up on schools, there are some schools that really do
Thank you.
try to help kids in this way.
Yeah.
But I thought it was very interesting that the culture she looked at, it's everywhere. So why is it so hard? I don't know. I heard one person say, let's do the platinum rule. Treat others better than you want to be treated.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if I know for sure. I got some subjective ideas. We forget, we forget that we ought to be treating people that way. We get caught up in the heat of the moment and all the other kind of things we've mentioned about judging while it gets in the way. Say, pride and all those kind of things. Kevin?
The love that we need to, the love that will help us with this problem, right, is that agape love that you talked about. So that's a learned action. So God is love. We need to love like God. How did God love us? Well, He first sent His Son, even though we were yet sinners. And I think that's the attitude that He's speaking of, right? We need to proactively practice that love, and then hopefully we'll treat the same way.
Yeah, if you just took the principle of agape love, that would solve this, and we operate on that basis, then we would inherently want to treat others the way that we want to be treated. If we take our theme this year, becoming like Christ, then that should become second nature to us then, because we're becoming like Christ. And so therefore we really seek to do that. Did you have your hand up, Richard?
Yeah, this wasn't just a suggestion by Jesus. He says, for on this hang all the law and the prophets.
What does that mean? Hangs all the law and the prophets.
Well, what it means is, if we don't live with this attitude, if we don't live with this by this standard, then the rest of it's null and void. The rest of it's all vain. Whatever we might attempt to do in the name of religion or whatever, it's all null and void because we haven't done it with the motive or the proper attitude, the proper heart.
Right. You know, if you take what is in the Decalogue as well as the various statutes, and so much of it has to do with the way you treat other people. And we could come back to Linda's R word here, respect. You know, I really like that a lot, Linda, the golden R. Boy, wouldn't that solve a lot of problems in our society? Just to respect people that have different views, whether you agree with or not, and even if they're not even right. I think a lot of us as Christians feel like that we are entitled when we're dealing with people that are wrong religiously to be disrespectful. And we're not. We're not entitled to that. We need to be respectful. Wait.
Your question about how easy is it to understand and learn. With our daughter Vivian today, with our younger daughter, she'll yell at her or not want to share her toys or whatever. So we'll tell her, Vivian, God asks us to treat others how we want to be treated. So is that how you want to be treated? And the graduation, like, oh no, I wouldn't want to yell at. But you know, it's something we have to keep teaching them. Because Kevin, I think your question about why do people not do it? I think how we're created is.
You think it's what?
How we're created.
How we're created?
Naturally, how we're created is we, as a person, we want to survive and take care of ourselves.
Okay.
If you don't teach kids who are younger that you have to take that and spread it to other people and share and help other people, then that's just going to become selfish. That's going to be portrayed as being selfish. And so then, once that happens, it's a lot harder. So Kevin's point is definitely something you have to learn to take that natural instinct to want to survive and take care of yourself and kind of spread it out and start learning to love other people that same way and share it out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there might be a lot of reasons. Maybe rather than me ask that question, we just need to figure out how we need to do it instead of figuring out why we can't do it. All right, let's look at verses 13 and 14, very familiar verses to us. Enter in at the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and there are many who go in by it, because narrow is the gate, and difficult is the way which leads to life, and few there be that find it. So we have a contrast here of the two ways. So the words, you know, are pretty simple, depending on the translation that you're using here. And I see I've actually used words different than what I just read. But you have straight and wide, narrow and broad, life and destruction, and many and few. And so here are the contrasts. And Jesus says there's two ways, okay? Now, when you look at the contrast of these two ways, what do we learn from this? And to whom does it apply? First of all, what do we learn from this? Just, it's kind of obvious. Kyle?
As I read these verses, I can't help but think back to verses 7 and 8, and the fact that it takes effort for us to find life. We need to seek it, we need to ask for it, we need to pursue it, we need persistence in it. Otherwise, we're just wandering, and we'll end up falling into destruction.
Yeah, definitely takes effort. Yeah, absolutely. Yes?
So these verses, I see it flowing all the way from chapter 1, because on the last slide, when it was
You say from chapter 1.
No, verse 1, sorry. From verse 1.
Oh, okay.
Chapter 1. Your last slide where you had righteous people treat people right.
Uh-huh.
I'm not one that puts caveats, but there is a slight caveat to this from this point, because it flows right into these verses. One, the caveat is righteous people, if we're talking about godly righteous, they will treat God always treats us right. And that's where these two verses tie this in. The point I'm getting at is, a lot of times, let me give you an example. A lot of times you get into conversations with folks where, it's like, well, can't you just be happy for me? But they're living in adultery. And it's like, okay, what do you want me to do? You want me to give you what the world expects, or you want me to tell you what the Bible, God teaches? You see? It's not that we're trying to prevent your happiness. It's we're trying to help you see there is a contrast. There is a wide way many go through because we want to be happy according to our happiness. And there is a very narrow way that only few find because they're following God's righteousness, not my own.
Right.
And that's what I'm getting at with this. Is a lot of times, it's like, oh, treat me righteously. Of course, everything you said so far is right. We're going to treat you right, but that's godly righteousness. And godly righteousness is one that kind of looks to the heart and sees, hey, listen, are you truly seeking me? Or are you trying to just find your own happiness, your own peace, your own, hey, give me my own space. And that's why I said from verse 1, that whole judging, then the persistence in asking. The persistence in asking flows that you're asking God's way, not mine.
Right. Okay, very good. All right. I learned from this that more people are going to be lost than saved. Don't you? I mean, it's pretty clear. Jesus says that. And I learned that it's easier to be lost than saved. As Dane alludes to, people just want to be happy. Well, I mean, if you just kind of go with the flow and live life to be happy, you may end up on the broad way as opposed to what you said, Kyle, of putting in the effort to get on the straight and narrow way. So it's easier to be lost than saved. And to be on the right road takes a decision. See, that you have to decide to be on the right road. It takes action. And the straight and narrow indicates the idea of difficulties. Will there be difficulties along the way? Yes, there's going to be difficulties. There's going to be challenges. There's going to be obstacles. There's going to be problems. There's going to be trials. Sure. But we understand, interestingly enough, in every other phase of life, be it education, or business, or sports, or health and fitness, you name any other area of life. Don't we understand that it's not always easy? That there's work, no pain without gain. If you're going to reach the stars, you're going to get some scars. I mean, all those cliches. And yet somehow when it comes to spiritual matters, that people think, well, it just ought to be an easy kind of a thing. And without any effort, that we're going to be pleasing to God. And that just goes against everything that we understand intuitively and intrinsically about life, about what life is all about. Okay. Now, to whom does this apply? Richard?
Everyone.
Yes. That would be you and I. So we want to resist the temptation of reading this passage, teaching and preaching on this passage, and making it them and us. The folks that are not here in this room this morning with us in this building, they're the ones. It's not us. Well, wait a minute. Could we be in this building and end up on the wrong road?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we could. Could we have our picture in the directory
Yes.
at the West Main Church and not be on the right road? Yeah, we could. And so as we study Jesus' life and we think about becoming like Christ and the Sermon on the Mount, and next week is, you got miracles? Tim's going to do miracles. By the way, just as those of you that may have been out, we hop back to whatever lesson that is. 5. Okay, so next week is lesson 5 on miracles, and then when I come back, I think I'm on parables then. So then I think we'll be kind of on track the rest of these lessons. But as we're reading all of this and studying it, let's look at ourselves. Am I who I need to be, and how can I improve to become more like Christ? Yes, Kyle?
I just wanted to say that this passage is one that
good, positive way to look at it that does offer assurance that we can be on the right road. Now, in the next section, Jesus talks about false teachers. And how does he describe the false teachers? What's the analogy here? What? Yeah, here is a wolf in sheep's clothing. And he goes on to say that we will know them, that he switches analogies here, that you will know them by the fruit that they produce. So what are some ways, just quickly, in which we know false teachers by their fruit? What would be some ways that we know them by their fruit? Yes?
One is teaching that's contrary to Scripture.
Okay, one is just simply when they teach something that's contrary to the Bible, to Scripture. What else? Anybody? Okay, how about their personal lives? You can look at their personal lives many times. Peter talks about that, about false teachers. The classic false teacher and what it is that has guided and motivated them. And so you look at that, as Linda says, their teaching. We might look at their attitude that is behind it. We may look at where their commitment lies. We may look at the results of the ministry and the lives of others. And so all of these different factors we may look at, and by their fruit, see, that you can ascertain that someone here is a false teacher. A lot we could say about that. It is a warning, and it is a warning again that we need to take heed to, because a false teacher does not come along with a flashing neon sign. Hey, I'm a false teacher. They're going to be disguised as an angel of light, as Paul put it in the Corinthian letter. They're going to have on sheep's clothing. The wolf in the story of Little Red Riding Hood, you know. And so when you look at the wolf and say, my, what big teeth you have, that may not be grandma. You know, this may be the wolf and not the sheep. So you look at the fruit, look at what's produced, look at what your senses tell you. Richard?
First thing Jesus says here is beware.
Beware, yeah.
We have to be wide awake and be paying attention. Secondly, it looks like we're going to have to use some judgment and some discernment.
Judge, yeah, another aspect of judging, no question. So in verses 21 and 23, there's two things. We're going to say Jesus is condemning something, then he's going to commend something. First of all, what is he condemning in 21 through 23? Okay, Kevin.
It's not just a show of personality or righteousness, that Lord.
Right. Not just a show of righteousness, saying Lord, Lord, claiming to be a believer and a follower of Christ, and yet here a person is acting outside of the boundaries of the law of Christ. And so he is condemning that. And so just a pious show that I'm righteous. And saying Lord, Lord is not enough. But then on the other hand, he is commending something. And what is he commending in this passage? Whoever does the will. Those who do the will of the Father that is in heaven. And so again, a passage that we oftentimes can look at and apply it to other folks. One that we always need to look at and look at ourselves. You know, am I just making a showy pretense of saying Lord, Lord, or am I actually doing the will of the Father? It's a probing personal question that we need to ask. Now, you look at the two builders, and Jesus is teaching here some spiritual lessons from these two builders. And a very familiar parable to us, and one the kids sing in the little classes, a song of the wise man and the foolish man. But there's some spiritual lessons here. So what are the spiritual lessons from these two builders that we get? Okay, Richard.
We need to make sure our foundation is built on solid rock.
Okay. Make sure the foundation is on solid rock. All right. Yes. All right. There really is no other foundation on which to build. What else? Anybody else? There is a need for both hearing and doing. Okay. That we see here in this passage. We mentioned the foundation. And there is a prudence that we need to have in preparing for times of storm. Will times of storm come? Yes. It's not a question of if, but a question of when. Right? the storms will come. We learn that, when it comes to building. If you live in Tornado Alley, or you live in places of hurricanes, like we did in Florida for many years, there's a building code to withstand hurricanes. And, our government has taken a lot of flack at our administration because we haven't got Puerto Rico up and running. Well, guess what? They are not built down there according to the kind of standards that we are being placed in the United States, and that's why there was such devastation. And it's taken so long to get the infrastructure back and up and running. But when you build on a sure foundation, the hurricane can come and you withstand it. And spiritually speaking, we're going to have those things happen. And the folly of building our spiritual lives on that which is sinking and shifting. Because when the storm comes, that we are going to sink. Hugh, you had a comment or question?
Even though you prepare beforehand, it's quite rare that you can think of all situations.
Right.
The foundation, if you share this basic belief system, then when these things do come unexpectedly and unforeseen,
Right.
ground on which to build.
Exactly. So you don't know what the storm is going to be, the intensity of it, when it's coming, but if the foundation is right and the building is right, then whatever it is, regardless, you can. So as we end the Sermon on the Mount, it says the people were astonished at Jesus' teaching. And they were astonished at his teaching because he taught with authority and not as the scribes and the Pharisees. So you think about the differences that they probably could see between Jesus' teaching and the religious leaders of that day. Any thought? Yes. Yeah, we talked about that. His emphasis on what he said. I say to you this, not what you've heard from the oral law. What else? Yes, Wade. Can you speak up a little?
21 and 23, he told them, those who come to me and say, Lord, Lord, and tell them I've never knew you. So rightly judge, condemnation, eternal life.
Okay, good. We're about to run out of time. Let me just bullet some things that I think I see here. The sincerity of Jesus' teaching and the apparent insincerity in the lives and the practice of the religious leaders. That Jesus was real. That Jesus wasn't Dr. Emmanuel, and pompous. That he was down to earth. And we see that as we unfold the life of Christ and his interaction with people. We see here that Jesus really cared. He was concerned about the needs of people and the problems of people. No doubt they could feel the passion of Jesus as he taught these things. I say it to you. And then, of course, the idea of the power or the authority, the emphasis with Jesus spoke. This was apparent. This was apparent. I mean, it didn't take you very long to read the Sermon on the Mount. But it was apparent in this interaction. So the question for all of us in this Bible class is, are you following the steps of Jesus? Peter tells us that we need to follow in his steps. And if we are following in his steps to become like him and to imbibe the teachings here that we learned in the Sermon on the Mount, guess what? We're going to become like Christ. Are you believing we actually finished Matthew 7? Thanks for your help. Let's have a great worship. Thanks for being here.